Hello, guys. Good evening and welcome to this amazing free class again. Lesson number 6 of the entire English literature optional. Try to get over the syllabus as quickly as I can. Today, we're going to talk about E.M. Forster's Passage to India, text which is part of paper 2 syllabus. We'll talk about the session is live. Ignore the thumbnail of the class because I'm going to change it. Everyone who has been waiting, please join in. Okay, it's live now. I'm sharing the link to all my Telegram students. Here it is. Cool. So just say a little hello so that I know who is watching and who is not watching. I asked yesterday to turn up in good numbers to see who is serious and who is not. Karthik here, Richa, I'm guessing Samprati, Priyanka, Archa, some of the regular students. Okay. Okay. Archa is here. So the Unacademy offer was extended this morning from 31st March to 1st of April. Batches for 21, 22, 23. So if you're still looking to join this fantastic league of educators, Nodal sir, Sudarshan sir, Siddharth sir, Ayushu Singh, Atish, Aarti, Ranganathan, Avdesh, Rakesh, so many fantastic educators. You have another day for the offer. This is the offer. For 1 year, you will get 16 months. So you'll get a guaranteed subscription until the 31st of July 2022. That's when the prelims is. There are batches for 2022, prelims batch for 2021 in Hindi and English. Then the 3 months prelims batch, Mudit Gupta, Anuj Gurg, Anuj Garg, Prakash Kumar and Dipanshu Singh. 1 year batches, 2 year batches, batches for prelims 21, NCERT batches, subscription offer, live classes, weekly tests, structured courses, unlimited access because you get recorded classes, and plus an iconic subscription. Two things. You can choose between a combo, which is optional NGS, or just for the optional. Pick a plan, pay, get 10% off when you use my code. Okay, so this is what we see, iconic, and don't forget the Unacademy Combat that happens every Sunday. It's happening on the 4th of April. Go there, enroll yourself, use my code instead of UPSCSC. Just apply Harshit.Bhardwaj, which is in the description. Use my code if you want to return the favor. Now, let us talk about E.M. Forster. Okay, how many of you have read the text? इतने सारे लोगों ने पढ़ी है. many of you have read it? Sejal has, Karthik has. Okay, I'm going to do something more interesting today. After this class, I'll give you 10 minutes and I'll give you a question from Passage to India and I'll ask you to write that answer. Send it to me. You'll only get 10 minutes. You'll have to write around 200 words. Okay, I'll give you 15 minutes. 200 words and mail it back to the email address that I'll provide. Then I'll evaluate it in the next class. Sounds good? Agreed? How many of you would like to go ahead with this live evaluation idea? Let's see how many of you can write it in 15 minutes. Whatever you can write in 15 minutes. Ah, interesting. Sounds like a difficult task. Huh? Sampriti there? Okay, so you're ready for that. If you've seen me teaching, if you've seen my Unacademy classes, if you've seen any of my YouTube videos, you understand how I teach text. I do not do summary of texts. That's why only those who have read the text can enjoy my lesson, any session that I do. Because I jump right into the critical analysis and the insight part. If I waste my time in summarizing to the story in English and Hindi, then you are not UPSC aspirant. There are tons of channels you can find, lots of places where you can read summaries. Although I ask you not to read any summary, read the original text and then turn up to my class. If you can do that, if you can do that, you'll get the most out of my class. So, what will I talk about? I'll talk about the most important concepts that UPSC has asked in last 10 to 15 years based on the PYQs, and I'll divide the session into those concepts. First one, the very first and big one is the structure of the novel. The tripartite structure. Mosque, caves, cave, not caves, and temple. Now, in this, you have potentially 4 or 5, 6 direct questions from just this one concept. There can be tons more. Why E.M. Forster structured the novel in 3 parts, tripartite structure. Discuss the significance of the mosque section. discuss the symbolic significance of the cave section, why the temple section was architecturally important, as E.M. Forster himself said, what happened at the caves, what happened with Adela Quested at the caves, how the caves impacted Adela Quested and Mrs. Moore differently. So many questions from just this. So symbolic significance of each section, mosque, cave, and you have to excuse the dogs. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the structure. When you look at the text, the very one of the first things you should look at it is how it is structured, how it is put together. So Passage to India starts with the mosque section, which is the first, then the cave section, which is the second, then the temple section, which is the culminating and the final section. Right? If we look at each section one by one, let's start with the mosque section. Okay. What happens in the mosque section? So when you looking at um, the structure of any text, the first step or the first initial understanding, initial trying to gain a critical insight. So what I hope that you get out of this session or any session that I do on working on a poem, working on a text, is I would like to give you tools of critical analysis, right? I'll try to trace my steps back as to how would I read this text and try to make sense of it. Keeping in mind always keeping in mind the concepts and the questions that UPSC is asked, because we only need to worry about the concepts that UPSC is interested in, not everything. So watch very closely the approach that I normally take. It's a little difficult for me because I have to go back and start reverse engineer my process so that I can give it to you and you can start thinking like this. So you're looking at the text, it's structured into three parts, and a tripartite structuring is quite common. It's quite a common structuring of a novel, in which what happens is the first part presents premise to a problem. The second part presents the not just the development, but the um, not the consequence, but turning over of that problem into its impact or its effect on the characters or on the novel. And the third part tries to bring normalcy to the world of that text. Right? So that's how the tripartite structure normally works in any novel. It's quite a common way of structuring a text. There are a lot of questions you should be asking when you look at the structure. In today's class, I will primarily talk about the structure. I'll take another class where I'll talk about the post-colonial theory and the post-colonial reading of a passage to India. That requires a completely separate conversation. So questions you should be asking when you're looking at this structure is the naming of the sections. Mosque, temple, then there is cave. The first chapter starts, there is nothing extraordinary in the city of Chandrapur except the Marabar caves. They are 20 miles, 50 miles off the city. And if you look at the last couple of lines of the first chapter, this is repeated. There's nothing extraordinary. The word extraordinary is repeated a few times. First chapter. So, mosque and temple, why the naming? When you look a little deeper and you realize that there are only two prominent Indian characters. Dr. Aziz, a Muslim, and Professor Bole, a Brahman Hindu. Is E.M. Forster playing in the extremes? Is E.M. Forster playing with antithesis, develop a narrative? Is E.M. Forster placing the entire understanding of the Indian culture, Indian country, Indian demography between the two major categories, like symbolized by a mosque and a temple? Is that what he's doing? That's a question you should ask. Keeping this in mind. Or is he, the name of the text is a passage to India, is he pointing out a very myopic understanding of the colonizers? Now we're getting into the post-colonial reading. Very myopic understanding of the Westerners or the colonizers and or the colonizers in the way they look at India. That when they look at India, they are in a rush and not very empathetic or sympathetic about the entire scenario, and they want to beat it down to the minimum factors, the minimum constraints. Hindus and Muslims, rich and the poor, kings and the rest of them. They try to, because to be able to manage such a big landmass, such a big population, so much of diversity, how do you make sense of it as a Westerner? So you need to beat it down to the minimum factors. Is Forster pointing and being satirizing this attitude of the Western people, the colonizers? Or is he doing it himself because he's a Westerner and this is the best way he can try and make sense of this vast demography, population, and culture? That's another question you should ask yourself. You can keep writing these questions. So what I'm doing here is, when the way to critical analysis is to ask a lot of questions from the text, raise a lot of inquiries, a lot of doubts. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And then, of course, you'll have to find a logical answer to that. Now, in the mosque section, what happens? If we overall we look at it, the weather is a nice weather. Yeah, it's congenial weather in terms of weather. And there is a sense of harmony. People come together. And with this premise, theme is initiated. What is the theme? What is the theme? Chapter 2, Hamid Ali, Hamidullah, and Dr. Aziz are discussing the theme, one of the many major themes, which is it possible to be friends with the British? Is it possible for the colonizers and the natives to be friends? Is it possible for someone like Cyril Fielding and Dr. Aziz to be friends? Is there a possibility of a relationship between the master and the slave? I think you're all aware of the master-slave dialect. Now, so in the mosque section, people come together. There is a sense of harmony. Mrs. Moore and Adela Quested arrive from England. Mrs. Moore visits the mosque and is exposed to the culture. There is Fielding's tea party, right? There is Major Calendar's party. Characters are introduced. Premise is set. We have two different kind of British characters, two different stereotypes. So Ian Forster is working with a lot of stereotypes, even though he is attacking the Oriental stereotyping, but he sticks with a lot of stereotyping. There are two kinds of British characters. One are typical colonial attitude, uh, characters with colonial attitude, like Ronnie, Major Calendar, wives of Major Calendar, and the others. Then there is the other kind is the sympathetic British characters, liberal British characters. Mrs. Moore, Adela Quested, and Cyril Fielding. Okay. Characters are introduced, sense of harmony is there, atmosphere is congenial, the weather is congenial, and the theme is initiated. Exploration of possibility of relationship. And this theme is explored throughout and answered on the very last page, on the last paragraph. When the earth says not now and the sky says not here. Something like that. So this is what happens in the mosque section. Does that make sense? Any questions? Anything you'd like to ask? Let's move on to the caves section, which is probably what happens in the caves, the symbolic significance of the caves, how it affects everyone involved, why Cyril Fielding and Professor Godbole are not able to get to the caves. Remember how that happens? They are not able to get there. Yeah. Hi, Sudhir. Uh, we're running a little behind, a lot behind, a lot of lag. Okay. So the characters who end up going to the caves are Mrs. Moore, Adela, and Dr. Aziz. What happens in the caves? There is an echo and a boom, sound of boom, which resonates with Om. You all know what happens in the caves, the literal what happens in the caves. UPSC asked this question, what happened at the caves? And a lot of students who sent me answers, they just wrote down what happened in the caves. They just explained what happened in the story, the paraphrasing of the story. And they're asking you what happened in the caves, they're asking you for the symbolics. What the hell happened in the caves? What made Adela Quested blame, allege rape or molestation by Dr. Aziz? So primarily, what happens in this is a violent clash of cultures. Shock, both. Shock plus awe. Let's take one by one. Mrs. Moore, a very religious and spiritual lady who follows her faith very much. And she is excited to visit the caves. She's heard so much about them. They're very ancient. One word that they are all using about the caves is ancient. Sudhir, hi. If you are the same student who joined last year, and so reach out to me. Ancient caves, not just, you know. So Mrs. Moore is excited. Mrs. Moore wants to go and check out the cave. She has a very strong faith. She's religious and she's visiting India. She's quite old. She's sympathetic to Dr. Aziz. She's sympathetic to the Indian culture. She's quite open, diplomatic. But then what happened to her at the cave? And she walks in there and she just visits one cave and she's exhausted. It's the utter darkness, and all you could see was your own reflection. The caves are very shiny from inside. All you could see was your own reflection, and the sound is echoing back to you. She couldn't take it. She came out right away. What is the symbolic meaning or significance of the word echo? What is an echo? Echo is something that comes back to you in a magnified, amplified state. Sound that comes back to you a little amplified. What about the echo in the caves amplified back the feelings, the apprehensions, the disillusionment, all that, everything that you had inside of you was echoed back to you and you couldn't take it and you have no answer. So the questions that you cannot answer, the deeper, subconscious, deeply embedded questions and ideas that you have no answer about. Don't forget that this book came out in 1924, right after the First World War. So the situation in Europe was quite tricky. Mrs. Moore must have experienced the horrors of First World War, and faith is shaken. Visiting the first cave, it was probably shaken to an irreparable level, right? And what happened? That she lost her faith in things, and she just wanted to get back, and she could not reach England. She dies on route. What happens to Adela Quested? A lot of theories. Some people. Now these are the questions you gotta ask yourself. He mistook somebody else to be Dr. Aziz, and she felt threatened. It was dark, and she felt threatened. She shouted, she ran, she had a panic attack, she fell down, and the cactus thorns pierced her body, and she passed out. And she just while she was passing out, when she woke up, she was just blabbering Dr. Aziz's name, so people figured out that Dr. Aziz did something. That's how the events transpired, right? And people just joined one plus one together. She was in shock, and by the time she realized what happened, Dr. Aziz was in the court on trial, arrested, and when the good sense prevailed, Cyril Fielding talked to her. She took her allegations back and went back to England. One of the theories is that she hallucinated. So, of course, this violent clash of cultures, shock and awe inside the cave, where there was nothing, feeling of nothingness, right? Feeling of nothingness, which is an Eastern idea that when the mind goes blank and the sensory inputs go blank, when it's absolute dark, absolute silent, you cannot see, you cannot hear, you cannot smell, you cannot taste, you cannot feel, and it's a kind of a state of nothingness. It's a shock to people, and she hallucinated, or subconscious ideas of being repressed, like she was trying to get married to Ronnie and she wasn't really ready for it. She wanted to figure out, work it out, and she'd agreed to get married to him just before the caves incident. So maybe this is one theory, that maybe she felt molested by this idea of getting married to Ronnie without loving him. She was scared deeply inside. That fear, that apprehension echoed back to her. And she ran. When she ran, she got into a panic attack, and then whatever happened, happened. So they both lost their senility. They both lost whatever faith in things they had. They were shocked. Shock is the right word. Shocked and awed by feeling of nothingness in the cave. And the result was that Dr. Aziz became the victim of this incident. So, sum total of the caves incident was that Dr. Aziz became absolutely certain that there can be no friendship. The Britishers cannot be trusted. He became absolutely furious. That was the sum total. So, this violent clash, this shock and awe worked for both sides, for the British characters as well as Dr. Aziz and Dr. Aziz. Right? Let's move on to the next section, which is temple. Karthik is asking, sir, was she affected by the feeling of nothingness disease? There is no such thing as feeling of nothingness disease. When she encountered that nothingness inside the caves, well, they went there expecting that there will be something to see, something to, entertain the senses. There wasn't anything there, just the shining caves. You strike a light and it's reflected. It was so shiny. It was like a mirror. So two things are there, echo and mirror. And both things do the same thing. They amplify it back. The mirror reflects back your own image. And an echo reflects back the sound. Right? So both sensory emotions are reflected back, magnified probably. Mirror reflects back exactly. So they were both forced to face their innermost feelings that outside of the cave were kind of suppressed or piled down under a lot of other things. This is kind of what happens when you meditate. When you start to meditate and you are asked to sit alone with yourself and there's nobody around you and you are asked to just look and hear and feel your own emotions. It is scary for some in the beginning because the most scary company is your own. So they, both of them, for the first time, were forced to stay alone, experience the most intense moments of solitude with themselves, where the real questions surfaced. For Mrs. Moore, it was a question of faith, which she was trying to hang on to. But she knew deep down that she had lost her faith. Maybe for whatever reason, maybe for the socio-political situation of Europe. And for Adela, it was a lonely situation in the situation of love, curiosity. Right? What happens in the temple section? In the cave section, if you see the contrast, in the mosque section, people come together. There is harmony. The weather is congenial. In the cave section, the weather is really hot. People clash. Right? The court case happened in the cave section. Right? The allegation of molestation happens in the cave section. So In the mosque there is congeniality and harmony. In the mosque, in the caves, there is a clash. The weather is super hot. People actually go away. Mrs. Moore goes away, Adela goes away, Dr. Aziz moves away. Right? In the temple, the loose parts, as I said, are put back together. The normalcy is restored in some ways. That's why A.M. Forster mentioned that this section was architecturally important. So, in the mosque section, Professor Godbole invokes the god come and come at Cyril Fielding's tea party. In the temple section, the gods come, right? They celebrate Gokul Ashtami. And there is a little harmony restored between God. And Cyril Fielding goes as far as to say that Dr. Aziz symbolizes muddle. Dr. Aziz is an example is an example of a model and symbolizes the entire India. पूरी country ऐसी है Dr. Aziz की तरह. So they've all formed their political opinions. They've all taken their vantage points. Dr. Aziz को जो समझना था हमीदुल्लाह हामिद अली Indian characters. So they've all got their own status quos. डॉक्टर अजीज की अपनी ओपिनियन बन गई, सिरिल फील्डिंग की अपनी ओपिनियन बन गई, एंड प्रोफेसर गोडबोले stays the same. He remains a passive character, spiritual religious passive character. And in this section, in the temple section, we start off with a very nice weather in mosque. We have excruciating heat in the cave. We have rains in the temple section. So kind of renunciation, reconciliation, possibility of reconciliation. Hmm? As much as is possible. Yeah? They depart on good terms, Cyril Fielding and Dr. Aziz. They stay friends, and he returns back a few years later with his wife, daughter of Mrs. Moore, Stella. But the novel ends at the note that the initial theme, which is possibility of friendship. And this question is answered. Possibility of friendship between Cyril Fielding and Dr. Aziz is not there. He says, out with the British. The Mughals, the Afghans, the Hindus, the Muslims, everyone can stay together, but not the Indians and the British. And the answer of this possibility of friendship and why it didn't work out is given by the post-colonial reading. The colonizer and the native relationship, it cannot be equal. The status quo is unequal. The ruler and the ruled cannot have a relationship. There can only be one relationship. Howsoever hard the people from both sides try, it's, it is simply the premise is such that it's not possible by definition. And this is what E.M. Forster presents very beautifully. He exemplifies, he presents, he shows it to the world. Does that make sense? Much clarity, I some clarity. So now I'm going to give you a question based on what we've talked about. Here is the question. Got it? Do you agree with Fielding's view that Dr. Aziz is the symbol of India's muddle? Do you agree with Fielding's view that Dr. Aziz is the symbol of India's muddle? 200 words, 15 minutes. Mail it to me on have the email ID. I'll give it to you again. Upsc.English at gmail.com. And your time starts now. If you type it, convert it to PDF. If you handwrite it, if there are number of pages 1, 2, 3, make one PDF with Cam Scanner or Adobe whatever scan and mail it to this. Time starts now. I'm logging off and I'll check back. It's 21:55. I'll log in back at 22:10. Good luck.